All right, so we are live. Good afternoon, viewers. Good morning, Atlantic, East Coast Canada. Thank you so much for joining us. I've had the pleasure of getting to know somebody over the past couple of years who's put me in a rational state of mind on most days prior to this worldly event. So I am honored to have Dr. Stephen O'Connor, a good friend of mine and family physician, out of the States, but he's traveled so much. Thank you very much for joining us, Stephen. I really appreciate this time. I know our viewers, I wrote down a few of the questions that have come forward in the last hour, and I just want to give you the floor. I know you've come to Canada quite a lot. You're very familiar. You came up to see myself and my kids there in Alberta one time, and you've been up to, is it the Yukon that your kids are in?
Alaska.
One of the kids is in?
Yukon and up
Alaska.
through there, Saskatchewan and Ontario.
Awesome. So, and I'm wearing, in Canadian trend right now, there's a lot of people turning on their Christmas lights outside as a Canadian trend. So in case you're wondering why I'm wearing an ugly sweater, that's just cause why. So I just want to welcome you again. And I'm stuck for words right now. So take it away.
Well, hey, Rebecca, first off, it's great to see you again. It's always a pleasure. You and I have had a spiritual connection since we met. And, you know, I remember I was thinking about today, and I remember the day I got off that bus, and your three children were holding signs in front of this great big stuffed grizzly bear out in front of this grocery store in the freezing cold, and your daughter wanted to wear her princess dress, and I'm thinking, man, these Canadians are tough. You know? So I do have a lot of fond memories. And then you went and you moved from Alberta to Nova Scotia, and I think we talked about how I have a family connection to Nova Scotia. I have my mom's side of the family are Decosses and Fougères. So they're my brother and sister,
right.
My brother and older sister actually went up there and met some of our relatives, and it was just like going home. So it was really an exciting moment for us. So, but you know, I think one of the reasons why you wanted me on today was to kind of talk about the craziness, which is the COVID-19 virus. And, you know, it's, yeah. I'm an emergency medicine physician, and I'm on the front lines of the COVID-19. And, you know, I'm very aware and up to date with what the CDC and the World Health Organization talk about it. I'm very familiar. I mean, infectious disease and is especially important to us in emergency medicine because a lot of what we do relates to infectious disease. And, you know, there's a lot of misinformation out there about what this virus is, what it does, where it came from, how it spreads, how lethal it is, how it compares with the traditional influenza viruses and such. And so, you know, even within the CDC and even within the United States government, there's a lot of information that doesn't necessarily jive. And I just listened to a statistic today, which was interesting, and you know, take it for what it's worth. In the United States, since the regular flu season has started, 30 to 40 million Americans have caught either influenza A or influenza B. And we've seen a heavy flu season since November. And right around Thanksgiving is when it really started getting hard. And, you know, we were seeing and testing 10, 15 people a day, and we're still seeing people that are positive for influenza. And to date, 20 to 40,000 US citizens have died from influenza. Now compare that with this COVID-19. And right now there's roughly 105,000 people in the United States that have contracted it. And we're a little over, I think, 1,500 deaths from it. And, you know, it's pretty interesting because you don't hear about the influenza, which is very lethal, right. But you're hearing everything about COVID-19, and they've literally shut down 25% of a $30 trillion economy in the United States because of COVID-19. And, so I'm not really sure where this is all coming from. I do understand that COVID-19 has a much greater risk of transmission. So it's anywhere from 3 to 10, 15 times more spreadable. So if I'm in a room with a person, 10 people with influenza, I may spread it to one person, maybe 2 people at the outside. COVID can spread to 3 to 6, maybe 7 people in that same room. So it's highly virulent and highly contagious. The death rate we're finding, was reported at initially 7%, then it's down to 5%, then it's down to 3%. Now it's under 1.7%, and it probably, once we start running the numbers after everybody has been tested, or most people have been tested, we're probably going to find that it's down below 1% and probably pretty close to the lethality of influenza A and B, the traditional influenza that hits seasonally. So what that number will ultimately be depends on literally how many people we test. We've got a lot of nationally and internationally, we have lots of tests for influenza. We were prepared because every year we have influenza, and we're stocked up, and so we're prepared. COVID kind of jumped out of the blue. It first started in China around November, is what we can gather from the Chinese. And then it peaked in January and February in China, and now has started to come down. We're seeing the same thing in South Korea, that it hits a 2 to 3 month peak and then it calms down. In the United States, we're in that peak. Now, the methods of shutting down our economy was to kind of blunt that curve and to level that curve. So because it is so contagious, we were looking at overwhelming our system. And how our system was going to be overwhelmed is we were already in peak flu season with 20 to 40,000 Americans dying of flu, and they usually died of respiratory complications, especially elderly people who were sick. We're seeing that exact same situation with COVID, that it's the people that are elderly. In Italy, for instance, the average age of people who died was over 81. They had pre-existing medical conditions. More than a quarter of the people in the Italian population is over 65. They smoke at a much higher level than, say, in Canada or the United States. So they were predisposed to having medical problems. And that's why we saw so many people in Italy dying. Well, what happened in the United States is we were looking at our flu season, which was putting our ICUs at capacity. And I'm sure this is pretty much the case in Canada too, because you guys have, similar demographics as we do in the States. And when this coronavirus hit, they were looking at a novel coronavirus that was going to infect maybe as many as 110 million Americans with a 1% lethality. 15% of those people would require significant medical treatment, and that was going to overwhelm our health system. And I think that's why people shut down the system. We didn't know exactly where this was going to go, but if it hit with the virulence that we were anticipating, it was going to take down our medical system and our health system, and push us into a situation like in Italy, where we would have to make decisions who lived and who died. There are places in New York where patients are coming in and they've got to triage them and say, look, this is a 90-year-old person coming from a nursing home with all sorts of comorbid problems, diabetes, chronic lung disease. They've got Alzheimer's. Do we really put our resources into resuscitating this person when we might need that ventilator for somebody younger with COVID? So it's created a bunch of issues that are very dynamic. And, I'm seeing on the screen, someone is asking if it's airborne. Yes, it is definitely airborne. It's an airborne virus. It's transmitted by droplets. And you know, when I'm in the emergency department, I wear an N95 mask, and an N95 mask is a higher level than what you characteristically see with surgical masks. And surgical masks aren't necessarily protect the surgeon and the surgical crew from diseases of the patient. It's to protect the patient from the diseases of the person wearing the mask. You know, in case they cough or have droplets that drop into the wound or drop, you know, into an immune compromised patient. So what we've done is, because it is airborne, and because it is a virus and it's transmittable via droplets, you want to have something that protects you, and you want to wear a full fitting mask that has N95 capabilities, which means that it can filter out 99.9% of the virus particles. That's a critical factor. Interestingly, in the United States, and this happened in my own hospital, we were running low on N95 masks. So the administrators decided, well, it's okay to use regular surgical masks or cotton masks that people had sewn, thinking, you know, okay, it's better than nothing. But really what was happening is we were putting out frontline people that were triaging these patients with COVID, and we've had documented COVID even in our little community, because it is everywhere. They were being exposed with cotton masks, which, you know, really don't filter out the viruses, but it was the best that they could do because they were worried about resources.
I have some questions from viewers that are texting me anonymously, Stephen. Is this, can you get it twice?
There is evidence that, yes, some people have contracted it twice. Now, you have to be very careful because most of this evidence is coming out of China, and we don't know one of two things: whether sometimes those COVID tests have false positives and they're false negatives. So if they had a false positive test and they were assumed to have had COVID and then recovered and then caught it again and then tested again and then showed COVID positivity, you don't know. Did they have influenza the first time or some other random viral illness? And then because their immune system was suppressed or depressed, then they got COVID a second time. You don't know. So that's one issue. The second thing is that this virus mutates, and a mutation can cause somebody to test positive for it a second time or get the disease a second time. The other thing is was that second test actually a false positive? Again, you know, there's a high level of false positives, false negatives with the initial tests that were rolled out in China. And so up to 80% of the positive or falsely negative, we just don't know yet. So, but, you know, theoretically, yes, you could potentially catch it twice, but it's unlikely.
I'm going to keep on putting up some questions here. I'm going to keep on putting up some questions from our viewers. Stephen, can you still hear me?
Yes, I can.
So the flu and COVID are two very different viruses. And then Andre Desjardins from Cape Breton Island, Nova Scotia says, are we safe outside, it being airborne?
Absolutely. You know, being outside is actually very beneficial. Droplets, if someone coughs or sneezes in a room where the air is fairly stagnant, those particles could potentially circulate in the air for up to 10 minutes before they drop. At least that's what the CDC is saying and some of the researchers. Being outdoors, that unless you're really close contact with somebody and they cough physically in your face or in very close proximity to your face or mucous membranes or your hands, then you potentially could get it if your hands touch your face, your mouth, your eyes. But being outside is an extremely safe way of mitigating exposure. You know, again, being out in nature is is wonderful. Being, that's why flu seasons run in the cold weather, and why they transmit, because people are cloistered. I can imagine, you showed me pictures of your Nova Scotian winters, and I'm thinking, who in their right mind would go outside? Only a Scotian. But anyway, you're cloistered, so it tends to transmit a lot more readily in an enclosed space. Outdoors, it's going to be mitigated by the air, the breezes, etc.
Yeah, and understandably so, why they're saying if you came back, I mean, a lot of us that traveled might have left before this escalated. We returned home. That's why they're advising. Tell us why they're advising 14 days isolation. And in your books as a physician, what would that mean? What would you be telling someone in isolation? The difference in Canada, I mean, or the States, isolation, what does that mean?
Well, the voluntary, there's two levels of isolation. There's a forced isolation, medical isolation, where they put you in a negative pressure room, which means that the air that goes in out of your breath into your space around you, the air around you, is actually sucked out of the room. So when someone opens up a door to a negative pressure isolation room, air rushes in, not air rushes out. So they keep you in that sort of quarantine, medically isolated. And that's someone who's severely ill with it or documented to have the COVID-19 novel virus. Regular voluntary isolation is just an isolation where you use, the big term is social distancing, maintaining roughly about a six foot distance from people around you, not drinking from the same cups, using health and hygiene precautions, washing your hands very well, covering your mouth and nose if you cough or sneeze, and then, not touching your face and your eyes and your mouth, not, kissing a family member or relative or something like that on the face, or etc. High-fiving instead of, a close hug. Those are things that people are talking about for the voluntary isolation.
So, sorry, I missed that because I just lost you there in a little second. So coming back from holidays, so you were one of those people, you went away on holidays before this escalated, you were sent home early, from your holiday. You were told to go home back to Canada before there was no flights. You're back home, you're in a 14-day isolation, you have kids, let's say. What would that mean, keeping the rest of your community safe? Isolation would mean, can you just repeat that? Because there seems to be, some confusion, some difference of definition. As a physician, what would you suggest to someone that's in that condition, just to make everyone at ease and safe? What would you recommend with that term?
I think if you were to go out in public, maintain 6 feet of distance with a person. Don't hug. Yeah. Just use hand washing hygiene. Wash your hands frequently. That prevents from transmitting the virus by touching a door handle or something. If you were to go into a grocery store, if you pick up the handle of a petrol pump, something like that. If you're constantly washing your hands, you want to make sure that you're not transmitting that virus to the next person that's coming by and touching that utensil or object. And they have shown that it can last for several hours, up to 24, 48 hours on metal, on wood, on surfaces, etc. It depends on the substrate that it's touching. But ultimately, if you go out shopping, just maintain a healthy distance. And if you touch a door to open up, say the cooler or something, carry with you some hand sanitizer and wash your hands. When you touch money, wash your hands. When you use any sort of public facility, just wash your hands down before, wash your hands after, and just use common sense hygiene. This is
yeah.
It's like going to the restroom. I would say use the same hygiene that you would use if you were changing your baby's diaper. You know, that's a way to do it. You wash your hands before, you wash your hands after, and you know, that's going to be very helpful.
I'm just reading some of our questions. Have they come up with a medication yet to help? What about, I don't know how to pronounce that name, Dr. O'Connor. Yes.
Chloroquine. They think that they have some promise with hydrochloroquine, which is a particular anti-malaria drug. And chloroquine is found all over the place. When I go down to the Caribbean or Central America for my medical service trips and such, you take an anti-malarial in high-risk areas. And chloroquine is one of those anti-malarials. It's been very effective for 70 to 80 years. We know the side effect profile. We know what it does. And they found that hydrochloroquine can disrupt some of the way that the virus impacts the cells and how it injects its RNA into our cell nucleus or near our nucleus to help it replicate. Now, viruses are unique. Viruses technically aren't a living organism. Now, they have RNA or DNA. There's RNA viruses and DNA viruses. RNA is characteristically something that is read by an area on the cell called the endoplasmic reticulum, which I don't know how many of you guys remember biology or botany, but I'm a botany and biology major, so, and medically, et cetera. But RNA gets replicated and transcribed by the host DNA, and it makes more of that. The RNA gets into the host nucleus and causes that host nucleus to just print out more of that RNA, and that replicates into the new virus. And that new virus then sheds itself to new cells, which then triggers their nucleus to make more of the viral RNA. Now, there are DNA viruses which do much the same thing. They kind of hijack the host's information and protein synthesis to make more of the virus. So it's technically not living because it can't replicate on its own. So when you take hydrochloroquine or azithromycin, which is another one, there are a couple of different things that have been proposed for helping to decrease the risk of that viral shedding. You actually disrupt a part of that communication with the cell, or the absorption of the virus into the cell itself. You're looking at many different ways of blocking that virus from getting into the lung tissue or getting into the host tissue. And that's what hydrochloroquine and chloroquine are actually using to mitigate that again.
And I'm just reading, you know, I'm just reading Donnie Ferguson's comment. The drug has killed a man in the States. You know, he's got concerns about that drug. Oh, here we go. I'm going to post this one, Dr. O'Connor, from Donnie Ferguson here in Cape Breton Island, Nova Scotia. He says, where the flu closely resembles, I don't know why it's not showing. Huh. There we go. Where the flu, oh, for heaven's sakes. Sorry. There we go. Where the flu closely resembles COVID, can the numbers be wrongfully reported to us?
Yes, it depends on the data collection. If they're using specific tests that are looking at COVID-19, which is a novel coronavirus, that is very specific for that particular virus, because the testing is looking at a particular protein that's, you've probably seen pictures of what the COVID-19 looks like, the virus looks like. It looks like a kind of a hairy tennis ball with these little finger-like and projections outside. Those little projections on the outside of the surface are very unique proteins that are individual to that virus. Now, influenza virus has a particular type of protein, and COVID has a particular, very distinct type of protein. So if they're looking at symptoms and not doing the specific test, yes, they may mess up on, and they may look very close, and you may get erratic numbers. If they're looking at specifically positive tests for the COVID-19 virus, then the numbers should be very specific, because we do have a good test for the influenza A and influenza B virus, and it is very separate and distinct from the COVID-19.
So Judy Ramsey says hello, first of all, from Hinton, Alberta. Hi, Judy. Judy was there that night, Stephen, with us for coffee at the grind there. She asked a good question, and all of us moms are like on lockdown. We're just trying to cover all our basics. So is 2 meters really enough of a distance then if it's airborne? Good question, Judy.
Yeah, you know, from what we can figure from the data, yes, it seems to be. But you know, there are a lot of different ways that you can catch the virus. Again, this is where hygiene and hand washing and everything is so important, because if it's airborne for just a short period of time, it's going to fall somewhere. It may fall on your hands as you're talking. It may fall on the surface on the counter where you're cooking food and you're preparing food. You may touch it and then walk in and your child has a little sniffle or runny nose, and you grab your tissue and you wipe their nose, and you could actually see the virus close to their mucous membranes. Now, the good news is, Judy, is that children seem to be much less compromised by this particular virus. They get it to either less of a frequency because their immune system is more vigorous because of their age and their youthfulness, or they don't. If they do catch it, they don't get the same level of contagion, the same level of virulence, and the same level of symptomology as, say, an older adult or someone, you know, like me. I'm over 60, so I'm in that high risk pool. But children seem to be pretty innately capable of managing this virus. And there's very, very, very rare cases of children having this virus or getting significantly ill with the virus.
So I've just put up to our viewers, and I just want to make sure, Dr. O'Connor, that I'm getting all the questions in that people have texted me. So feel free to keep saying any words you want to share with anyone that's watching. We have a lot of viewers all over nationally right now. So just feel free to talk. I'm just going to scan over.
Now, one of the things that the viewers had asked was a gentleman who died of the hydrochloroquine. And, you know, that's a distinct concern with any pharmacologic agent, is that, you know, there is a risk profile. Now, we do know that it's fairly safe in most people. Most people, if they have hydrochloroquine or chloroquine, the worst that they're going to experience is sometimes a little bit of a headache. Bad dreams is a very common thing. Diarrhea, but you can have a fatal reaction to it. And one of the areas of my particular interest and passion, and I know that you as well, Rebecca, is a more natural, more naturopathic way, homeopathic way of dealing with health, wellness, and disease in general. And there are lots of natural things that you can do, non-pharmacologic measures that you can do that can really help prevent you from either contracting it, or if you do get exposed to the virus, where your immune system is vigorous enough to repel it or to minimize the effect on your body. And some of those things are sleep. You know, sleep is absolutely critical for your immune system. The older you are, the more necessary you need a good, adequate, anywhere from 7 to 9 hours of sleep a night. And what that does is, when you sleep, that's when your body's repair mechanism starts kicking in. You start to repair damaged DNA, protein. You help mobilize white blood cells into areas, specifically the respiratory tract, where this contagion can engulf you. You also you build proteins, you build your mechanism, your DNA molecules actually get supported. You reduce the cortisol that's secreting in your body. You're increasing melatonin. You're increasing the circulating vitamin D while you're resting. And those are all, you know, the yin and the yang. The cortisol puts you at risk. The melatonin, vitamin D, etc., makes you healthier. So when you rest, you're boosting your immune system. The other things, you know, certainly exercise. Just before I got on this call, I was on my treadmill and I was doing intermittent training. So you do high intensity intermittent, so small little bursts of high activity for short periods of time. Then you rest, and then you burst and rest and burst and rest. And you met me when I was doing, you know,
the Ironman.
My Ironman and my ultra marathoning. And with my age,
yes.
I've had more wisdom. And we're finding out that people who do marathons, ultra marathons, Ironman races, you're actually damaging your heart over a long period of time. You're damaging your heart, you're damaging your bones, your muscles, because the body isn't used to doing that sort of intensity over long periods of time. Now we were, you know, we were built to do short, you know, steady bursts, then rest, steady bursts and rest. Like if we were chasing a gazelle on the plains of Africa, we would be able to outrun them over a long period of time, and they wouldn't be able to get away from us, you know, a tribe of people going after them. But we're not built for high intensity for long, prolonged periods of time without doing damage. So doing high intensity interval work, it only takes 30 minutes. You can do it in your home. You can do squats. You can do air squats. You can do weights. You can do body weight things where you're doing push-ups against your counter. You can do anything with jumping jacks, or, you know, the Royal Canadian Air Force has an incredible short, intense workout program that you can use, and it's famously used around the world because it's an awesome workout program. Supplements, you know, in Canada you can do CBD. CBD is a natural immune booster, and it decreases the virus's ability to attach itself to the tissues, especially in the respiratory tract. It disrupts the biofilm. It disrupts the ability of the RNA or DNA to get into the cell and to replicate. So that's very good. You know, vitamin C is critical. Zinc is critical. Vitamin D, which is something that you guys up in the Great White North have to really worry about because you're not exposed to sunshine. Right. So you need vitamin, especially supplementation of vitamin D3. And if you take D3, you really need to take vitamin K2 with it because one needs the other to be metabolized. You need to get exposure to sunlight. 30 minutes a day is going to be ideal, but it's kind of hard when your temperatures are what they are oftentimes up where in Canada during the middle of the winter. So vitamin D is very good. Yeah. Melatonin, which you get from sleep, is very good, but supplementing with a melatonin product is very useful. I would start out with 0.3 milligrams and then work your way up to 3 milligrams if needed. If you do well, if you can sleep and rest well at 0.3 milligrams, I would just use the very small amount because a little will go a long way. Zinc, selenium are very important for health and wellness. You know, the natural phytochemicals that you get in greens, kale, broccoli sprouts, bean sprouts, and those are all things that you can do at home. Broccoli sprouts are an amazing superfood. They have a sulfur like component in it, and it's the highest concentration when the broccoli sprout is young, and that can really boost your immune system. And you can do that without sunlight, really. You can sprout those seeds on trays in your kitchen. They don't even require much sunlight, and you can benefit from those wonderful phytonutrients and natural products that are found in sprouts and in greens in general, whole foods. So those are all important things that you can do to boost your immune system and make you well. knock on wood, I have not had the flu in a number of years, and I do not take the flu shot. Some people don't like that when I say that. I hope none of my administrators at my hospital are listening to this, because
that's why I have you on, though, is because I knew you were going to be transparent and honest. So it's your personal choice.
Yeah, it's, it is to a certain degree. In the States, they can arbitrarily force you, depending on what your status is, where you work, et cetera. They can force you to take an influenza vaccination. And, realistically, if you do take it, it's 25 to 40% effective. Most years, some years they get a little bit better, and it may be 50 to 60. Over the last couple of years, I've been just kind of doing an offhand survey, and most of the people who have had influenza were people, I would say probably 60% of the people had already gotten their influenza vaccinations, and they still came down with influenza. So I'm not saying don't do it. I'm just saying, it's up to you. It's your, in most cases, your free will. And, just do it with.
And I like the point.
Education.
I like the balance you made. Like, that's a real visual description for me. I'm going to speak as a mom, is to hear that balance. Like, if you're going to put yourself in panic and anxiety and stress, it's going to outweigh the benefits of thinking clearly and how to just manage this rationally. And I think that's so important right now, no matter where you live in the world, is stress produces cortisol. Cortisol kicks your immunity down. So I really like that point that you brought out. And if you want to elaborate on that here, we have about 6 minutes before we close the show. Any closing words? And I want to have you on again, though, to talk about a couple things. One is the supplements and also the benefits of CBD. But before we go, if you could just elaborate on balancing the stress and anxiety that's so obvious right now in all of us.
Well, I'm going to answer Donnie Ferguson's question. Yeah, I think, you can use those filters outside for protection. And, again, it just depends on your level of comfort. I traveled back and forth from California to Indiana on an aircraft, and a lot of people I was in LAX, Los Angeles International, and there were probably 25% of the people in that facility were wearing masks. When I got to Chicago O'Hare, again, probably 25, maybe a little bit more, 30% of people were wearing masks. Did I feel comfortable being in an aircraft? Yes, because they superheat the air, then they cool it, and then they run it through HEPA filters. And they've been really taking a lot of precautions about going through and disinfecting things. So it just depends on where you're at. Would I take extra precautions if I were walking into a hospital? Absolutely. Doctor's office? Absolutely. If I was in an area where there were a lot of people trafficking through that, are at high risk for COVID, I would definitely take some extra precautions. But, just being outside and being, casually around people, social distancing, I wouldn't be too concerned. Going back to what you were saying about the stress and the cortisol, yes, it's interesting because a lot of people have been stressing out, and this came to mind. One of my sons has a friend that is absolutely fanatical about keeping himself from getting the virus. He puts his food out for a couple of days. He waits, just unbelievable. But he's much more likely to catch the virus than I am. I don't worry about the virus. I meditate on twice daily, but that's just for my own health and wellness. But being constantly stressed about this situation, this virus, is actually going to make your immune system up to 50% more likely to catch the virus than if you were just relaxed. Have, just like any virus situation that's going around, common sense. common hygiene, you know, use standard precautions. Don't worry, don't fret too much about this, because, you know, worry, the only thing you have to fear is fear itself. Franklin Roosevelt said that during World War II. And, you know, you just, or what Winston Churchill, you know, be calm, you know, stay, what is that?
Die if you must, but don't die if you must, but don't panic.
There you go. Absolute. And, you know, these guys were going through times that were not only medically stressful, but, you know, their lifestyle, their livelihoods, their freedoms were at risk. And they took things in perspective. COVID is not like World War II. It's not like the great flu pandemic of 1918. It's entirely different. We have a much different world. We have a much safer health system. You're more likely to be injured riding in a motor vehicle. You're much more likely to be injured in a home accident than you are to succumb to COVID. So, you know, just put things in perspective. 100,000 people in these states out of 340 million have contracted the virus. 1,500 people have died out of 340 million people. And, you know, we're not at the end of our peak, but certainly that's not something to globally panic over. Concern, yes, but again, just use common sense hygiene. Relax. If you're finding yourself stressed out, realize that that's making things worse, and then take 5 or 10 minutes and center yourself, meditate, breathe through your nose for 4 seconds, out through your mouth for 4 seconds. Do that for 2 minutes. You'll stimulate your parasympathetic system, which then stimulates your immune system, lets those white cells loose from your vascular lining, and puts them on guard for the things that are going to harm you. So, you know, just use common sense.
And moms, I have a tip out there. It seems so simple, but I have 4 kids under the age of 12. They're picking up on the stress of this. You know, we've canceled events. There's been a lot of things change and, you know, adapting. One of the kids does not do well with change. Last night, well, the past couple nights, they couldn't go to sleep. So we have a little routine now at night. They have to jump 100 times in the hallway up and down. And as simple as that sounds, it really made them instinctively take a deep breath and listen to what I was saying. Let's rest, let's get some sleep. And they went off to sleep. So, I mean, just a little tip, if you have little ones, they don't need the big explanation, but just to get their heart rate up and so that they rest into a good sleep. And that's all I had to say, because I really, really, really appreciate you coming on today. And I would like to have you on again. So I'll message you. And viewers, if you're not comfortable with putting out comments, don't worry about it. Message us anonymously, and we can ask Dr. O'Connor questions in our next upcoming show. Thank you so much for coming on. I appreciate how busy you are. Thank you to all our healthcare workers out there that are riding at dawn. Thank you so much for being at the front lines. And I don't have anything else to say, but thank you very much, Dr. Stephen O'Connor. And thank you, viewers, for your support and your questions. This broadcast is officially over.
Be well. Thanks, Rebecca. It's nice seeing you again.
You as well. Thank you.